Okay, pre-cal students, welcome to the homework help video. Please use this to help you get your questions answered on your homework. And the assignment we're looking at is page 50, numbers 29 through 43 odd. Here we go. Let's start off with number 29. The method I told you you had to use was a factoring method. And so let's go ahead and solve this quadratic equation using the factoring method. First of all, you want to get one side equal to 0. That's already done for you. So next we're going to want to factor this trinomial. Now notice it's a trinomial that has a lead coefficient of 1. That's the easy kind. So I'm going to list out all the factors of negative 28. Now to save time, I'm not going to do that. It would end up being a negative 4 and a positive 7. A negative 4 times 7 is a negative 28, and when you combine them you get a positive 3. So the factorization would be x minus 4 x plus 7. Isn't the factoring method fast? It really is the best way to go. And now you simply say, what would make this parentheses a 0? Well, obviously 4 would. 4 minus 4 is 0. What would make this parentheses a 0? Obviously a negative 7. Negative 7 plus 7 is 0. So your two answers then would be 4 and negative 7. And now let's move on. Now number 30, I want you to use the quadratic formula method. Okay? So negative b plus minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. I'm going to highlight and save this so I won't have to write it over every time. Let me do that real quick here. All right, there we go. Now, you want to get one side equal to 0, and we've already done that. That's the first thing you have to do. Now, what's in front of the x squared? A 1. So we know a equals 1. What's in front of your x term? Negative 8. So we know b has to equal negative 8. Now notice there's no c term. So if there is no c term, then we're just going to say c equals what? Nothing, which is 0. So easy enough. There we go. Now we come over here. The quadratic formula says I have a negative sign right here, and then also what am I going to put in for b? Well, I'm going to put a negative 8 in for b. So I've got a negative negative 8, and a negative negative 8 would give me a positive 8. And then next is plus minus, so I'll put my plus minus, and then next I have b squared. So I come over here, b is negative 8. If you square negative 8 times negative 8 is a positive 64. And then I have negative 4ac. So negative 4, and then a times c. A times c. 1 times 0. 1 times 0. Well, that's 0. And then all over 2 times a. A is 1, so 2 times 1 is 2. So we're moving right along. Now be careful inside your radical. A lot of students want to take 64 minus 4 first, and that's wrong. It would be 8 plus minus, and the first thing you do is your multiplication. And negative 4 times 0 is 0, so we have 64 minus 0. That's just 64. So there we go. Again, let's go over that again. 4 times 0 is 0, and 64 minus 0 is 64. Now, I know the square root is 64, so I'm going to come over here and kind of work backwards. So I've got 8 right here. There's my 8. And then plus minus. And what is the square root of 64? Well, please don't put the square root of 8. The square root of 64 is not the square root of 8. The square root of 64 is just 8. And then all over 2. Well, because I have two signs here, a positive and a negative, I'm going to rewrite this fraction two different ways. First, I'm going to put 8 plus 8 all over 2. And then I'm going to put 8 minus 8 all over 2. Well, 8 plus 8 is 16, and 16 divided by 2 is 8. So there's one answer. And then 8 minus 8 is 0, and 0 divided by 2 is 0. So your two answers are x equals 0 and 8. And there's your two answers. Moving on to number 32. Let me quickly grab a drink of water here. Now on your homework assignment, I told you needed to factor number 39. So the first thing you do is get the right side, or get one side equal to 0, and that's already done for you. So next we factor. We have a trinomial with a lead coefficient of 1. Those are the fast kinds. So I'm going to list out all the factors of 9. I'm not going to take time and do that. I'm just going to tell you right now, this is the group you want. A positive times a positive will give you 9, and if you add those, you get 6. So the factorization would be y plus 3 and y plus 3 equals 0. Now, what makes this parentheses a 0? Well, a negative 3 plus 3 would be a 0. And what makes this parentheses a 0? Well, a negative 3. So your answer is negative 3. If you wanted to write negative 3 twice, I guess you could. I would have no problem with that, but the answer is negative 3. So earlier in the lesson, during the video, I told you guys sometimes quadratic equations will have one answer and sometimes two, sometimes none. And this is one of the examples where the quadratic equation has just one answer. All right, number 35. I did tell you in your homework to use the quadratic formula method on this one. So the first thing you do is get the right side equal to 0. We take this 20x and we bring it over, and when we do that, we make it become a negative 20x. Now look, students, it's gone. Equals 0. Now look, please don't add these two terms together right here. And please don't add these two terms together. They're all unlike terms. This is an x squared term. This is an x term. And this is a constant term that does not have an x with it. None of them are alike. So what you do is you just write them in order. X squared first, and then your x term next, and then your constant term last. And you know why I did that? Now I'm ready to use the quadratic formula. There's a 1 right here. So we know a equals 1. We know b equals a negative 20. And we know c equals 100. And then we also should have our quadratic formula saved. There we go. So here's my quadratic formula. Now let's go ahead and make our substitutions. Negative b. Well, here's b. It's negative 20. So where b is, I'm going to put a negative 20. But notice there's also a negative sign here. So I have a negative 20, which would be a positive 20. And then plus, minus, okay, b squared. We can do that in our head. A negative 20 times a negative 20, that would be a positive 400. And then we have negative 4ac. So negative 4, and then do ac in your head, 1 times 100. 1 times 100 would be 100. And then in the denominator, 2 times a. 2 times 1, which is 2. Here's your a. A is 1, so you put a 1 right here. 2 times 1 is 2. Now, working inside the radical here, remember you do not subtract first, you do your multiplication first, and that is the number one most common mistake students make. Negative 4 times 100 is negative 400, so I have 400 minus 400 all over 2. And of course 400 minus 400 is 0. So now I have 20 plus minus the square root of 0 all over 2. Do you see where that 0 came from right there? 400 minus 400. Now, because I have a positive and a negative, I need to write this two different ways. But you're going to see in the end, in this problem here, whenever you have the square root of 0, it's really not going to make any difference. You're going to get the same answer out, and you'll see that in a second. The square root of 0 is 0, because 0 times 0 is 0. So 20 plus 0 over 2, and then 20 minus 0 over 2. Well, 20 plus 0 over 2, that would just be 20 over 2, which is 10. And 20 minus 0 is 20, and 20 over 2 is 10. Now, if you want to write 10 twice, you're more than welcome to do that, but x equals 10. And we got that by using the quadratic formula. All right, let's continue on to the next page. We're going to factor this expression right here. We're going to factor it. Now, the first thing you understand is you want to get one side equal to 0. That's already been done for us. So next, we notice we have a lead coefficient of 1. That's the easiest kind. We're going to list out all the factors of negative 32. And if we do that successfully, we're going to end up with a positive 4 and a negative 8. If you multiply those two, you get a negative 32. If you combine those two, you get a negative 4. So my factorization would very simply be x positive 4, x negative 8 equals 0. Okay? Now, what group would make this parentheses? What number would you put in for x to make this parentheses a 0? Well, negative 4. Negative 4 plus 4 is 0. What number would you substitute in for x to make this parentheses 0? Well, 8. 8 minus 8 is 0, so there's your two answers. X equals negative 4 and 8. There are your two answers. All right, let's go on to numbers. Scroll down here a little bit. Let's go on down. 3 problems left, just about done. Let's go to number 39. And we're going to solve number 39 by using the quadratic formula. Okay, step 1 for using the quadratic formula is get one side equal to 0. Well, that's already been done for us, right? Sure, here's your 0, so we're good there. So next we're going to list out A, B, and C. Looks like A equals 3. Looks like B equals 8. And C equals 4. So with that in mind, let's go ahead and get started. Negative B. Well, B's 8, so where the B is, I would put an 8. There's a negative sign on the outside, so it looks like I'm going to start off with negative 8. And then plus minus. On the inside of the radical, please notice I have B squared right here. B squared. Well, B is 8. 8 times 8 is 64. And then minus 4. Do you see this? Minus 4 AC. A times C. Well, A is 3, C is 4, so 3 times 4 is 12. All over 2A. A is 3, so 2 times 3 is 6. All right, now remember next, a lot of students want to take 64 minus 4, and that's not correct. You do your multiplication first. So next we would have negative 8 plus minus the square root of 64. Now watch, a negative 4 times a positive 12. Negative 4 times a positive 12 is a negative 48 all over 6. Now we're going to continue this way up here. All right. Now look under your radical here. You can still do some more simplifying. We have 64 minus 48, so negative 8 plus minus the square root of 16, because 64 minus 48 is 16. And that's all over 6. Now we know the square root of 16, it's 4. So now I have negative 8 plus minus 4 all over 6. And now we're going to rewrite this two different ways. Negative 8 plus 4 over 6, and negative 8 minus 4 over 6. So here's my place for my answers up here. X equals, or Y equals, excuse me. Now, let's take a look at this problem here. A negative 8 plus 4 would give you a negative 4 up top with a 6 in the denominator. So negative 4 6 reduces to 2 goes into both those numbers, negative 2/3. There's one answer. Now down here, a negative 8 and a negative 4 gives you a negative 12 over 2. Negative 12 over 2. Well, negative 12 divided by positive 2 would be a negative 6. And there's your two answers. All right. Let's take a look at number 41. We're going to solve this by factoring. Solving by factoring. So here we go. The first thing you want to do is get one side equal to 0, so we better bring that 6 over. And when we bring that 6 over, there's no like terms to combine it with, so I just simply make it a negative 6 and write it right here. Now, this is going to be one of the factoring trinomials that, unfortunately, is one of the harder ones. We do not have a lead coefficient of 1. We have a lead coefficient of 12. So we're going to have to take 12 times negative 6 in our heads, and then over here we're going to have to write negative 72. Now, we would then list out all the factors of negative 72. I'm going to make this a little easier for you. We would have a negative 8 and a positive 9. If you multiply those, you get a negative 72. If you combine those, you'll get a positive 1. And what's in front of this z right here? A positive 1. Okay. Now don't forget, we take this z term and we write it two different ways with a z. So we have negative 8z, and then we have positive 9z. And then bring down your negative 6. And bring down your 12z squared. Now, remember what to do. Pull out what's common in the first two terms, pull out what's common in the second two terms. Let's start over here. I can pull out a 4 and a z. So if I do that correctly, I'm left with 3z minus 2. Now look at these two terms, a 9z and a 6. I can pull a 3, or factor out a 3 out of both of those terms. So I'm left with 3z minus 2. And that's good. My parentheses match, so I'm going to go ahead and write 3z minus 2. And of course, in the other parentheses, it would be 4z plus 3. Now, students, listen to me. This is not one of the, well, some of you are probably getting to the place where you could do this in your head. I can do it in my head. This would be a positive 2/3, and this would be a negative 3/4 for your two answers. But I would not try to do them in your head right off the bat. When you cannot look at this and easily figure out, sorry, excuse me for yawning, I apologize. If you cannot look at this first parentheses here and say to yourself, oh, I know what to put in for z to make this parentheses a 0, then just go ahead and quickly work it out. It only takes a second. 3z minus 2, set it equal to 0. Bring the 2 over and make it positive, so positive 2. And now divide by 3. And when you divide by 3, you get 2/3. And that's one answer. Now take this parentheses, 4z plus 3, very quickly, to set it equal to 0. Bring the 3 over and make it a negative 3, so 4z equals negative 3. And then divide both sides by 4. And when you do that, you will get a negative 3/4. And those are your two answers, and those are the correct answers. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at this last problem here. We're going to solve this last problem by using the quadratic formula. Now remember, step 1 when using the quadratic formula is to get one side equal to 0. Now watch carefully what I do here. When I bring the 5a over and make it a negative 5a, I'm going to write it next. Now, I guess you don't have to do that since we're not factoring, but it does help to keep things kind of in order. Your squared term first, then your next term, then your constant term. Okay, I have one side equal to 0. And now I can see that a equals 12, b equals negative 5, and c equals negative 28. There we go. Now, let's come up here. Negative b. So b right here is negative 5. So where b is, I'm going to put a negative 5. And there's already a negative sign out front. So I have a negative 5, which would be a positive 5. And then plus minus the square root of b squared. We all know that a negative 5 squared would be a positive 25, And then next inside the radical, we have a negative 4, and then AC, A times C. Now I really can't do that in my head. 12 times negative 28 would be a negative number. I'm going to do it real quick right here. Don't have a calculator. 96, 24. I'm getting a negative 336. I hope that's correct. So that's A times C. And then all over 2 times A. And of course A is 12, so 2 times 12 is 24. All right, now inside your radical here, do not take 25 minus 4. You first do your multiplication, so it would be 5 plus minus the square root of 25. And now we have negative 4 times negative 336. Negative 4 times negative 336, that would be a positive. And let's see what you would get. 24 carrier 2, 4 carrier 1. I'm getting 1344. Hope that's right. I did it quickly. If not, I guess we'll find out later. 1344. All of that is over 24. And now one more quick step. We can add those two numbers together inside the radical. And when you do that, you would have 5 plus minus the square root of 25. That's 9, 1369. All over 24. And sorry about that, students. Hold on one second. Now, students, when I look at the square root of 1369, I know that's not a square root you have memorized, like the square root of 25 or the square root of 16 or the square root of 4 or whatever. But using a calculator, which is what I just did, I paused the video and I did that, the square root of 1369 is actually 37. So now I have, and I'm going to come up here, I'm going to get rid of some of this multiplication over here. So now what I have is, see this 5 right here, 5 plus minus, so 5 plus minus the square, no square root, sorry. The square root of 1369 is just simply 37. Use a calculator if you need to. all over 24. And now because of this plus minus, I'm going to go ahead and write this thing two different ways. So 5 plus 37 all over 24, and then 5 minus 37 all over 24. Now let's see. 5 plus 37 would be 42 over 24. Now I know that can be reduced. 21 and 12, I think 7 and 4. Yes, 6 goes into both of these numbers, and 6 goes into 42 7 times, and 6 goes into 24 4 times. So there's one answer, 7/4, or if you don't like 7/4, you could say 1 3/4, or 1.75. That's totally up to you. Now let's come over here. 5 minus 37, use a calculator if you need to, that's a negative 32 all over 24. Now 8 goes into both of these numbers, and 8 goes into 32 4 times, and 8 goes into 24 3 times. So negative 4/3 is your other answer. You could put negative 1 1/3 if you wanted to, or you could put negative 1.3 repeating. But either way, here are your answers. I'm going to write your final answers like this. I'm going to use improper fractions. So a equals 7/4, comma, negative 4/3. And like I just said, there are more forms, other forms you could use for your answers for 7/4 or for negative 4/3. That's it. I hope this homework video has been a help to you. And don't hesitate to contact me if you have questions.